This is a stupid statement, all right? I think I demonstrated that the inherent instability in the trap bar creates a greater safety hazard than does the deadlift. And to assert that the deadlift has a higher chance of injury than the trap bar deadlift indicates that you don't know what the fuck you're talking about.
The topic at hand today is the trap bar. It is a free weight implement that people seem to have very strong opinions about. And wherever you can have a strong opinion about free weights, Mark Rippetoe will insert himself. I found this clip from a few years back where he was absolutely losing his shit and proclaiming that the trap bar is worthless and it belongs in the trash. So we're going to react to that. I just got to start off by saying it's funny. These trends, these fashion cycles that happen in lifting culture. It's an ever-rotating treadmill that we're on. And if you stick around long enough, you can see things start to repeat themselves. Just as soon as something goes out of style, it comes back in. It used to be the Smith machine was a thing that would get you roasted. It was for geriatrics and non-serious sedentary accountants for every third meeting with their trainer that they would actually show up to. And if you were a serious lifter and you got caught on it, somebody would come up and be like, oh, you're going to put on your velvet gloves after this and go lift the pink dumbbells, Nancy. You're late for your booty Zumba class. And then you realize like the biggest, strongest motherfuckers in the world use it because stability is really good for motor unit recruitment and force production. Who would have fucking thought? So now we're going to give the trap bar the same treatment. I'm going to give my 2 cents. Most importantly, I'm going to tell you how I utilize it, how I think it can be very effectively utilized as a tool that can be a game changer to your deadlift if you have a certain set of problems or if you approach it right. So we're going to get into that. Let's go.
This useless piece of junk is a trap bar. I know that's a rather harsh statement, but I see no point in it. And the only reason we're even talking about it today is because recently the United States military has decided to adopt this device as part of their brand new, so much better thought out version of the physical fitness testing that they do for various types of applications in the military. And
I always think it's really funny when people lose their shit over what like non-serious entities are doing with regards to training. Like if a corporation implements a training protocol because their insurance is going to give them a discount, or if police or military are implementing testing to make sure that the people coming in just aren't basic fat shits. They're not trying to do the same thing that we're doing. They don't have the desire for the excessive cumbersome amounts of muscle tissue. And going from a 500-pound deadlift to a 600-pound deadlift probably isn't going to make their people better overall on the whole, because it's not going to carry over directly to what you need to do. And it's also going to come with a bunch of extra shit like overuse issues, recovery issues, and so on. It's not the same fucking thing. So I just got to start out with that.
This is being called a deadlift. All right, this is a trap bar. It is not a barbell. And to perform a deadlift, you have to have a barbell. Now, there are several things about this device that make this not a deadlift. It makes the movement so dissimilar that there's not really any reason to call it a deadlift because it's not nearly as useful. And in fact, there are several aspects of it that when used as an actual strength training device with heavy weight makes this a rather dangerous and unstable thing to do.
So we're already down the sewer tunnel of pedantic bullshit. Apparently, we have to be very vigilant about how we use the term barbell and the word deadlift. It means something very specific. And don't you dare confuse it or else you'll disrespect the gods of gains and confuse everybody. So I guess when I'm doing that thing where I grab dumbbells and I hinge to get a deep stretch of my hammies, I shouldn't call that a dumbbell Romanian deadlift because Romanian deadlift is done with a barbell. And I guess Ukrainian deadlifts don't fly, axle deadlifts don't fly. Man, I'm happy I found this. I've been using these fucking terms wrong all along. I'm also really interested in this reefer madness turn he's about to take with how unsafe and dangerous a trap bar is compared to a straight bar.
Talk about the primary feature of the trap bar here, which is the absence of a central shaft. You stand in the middle of this, grab the handles, which are a fixed distance apart, and pull it up. Now, a deadlift limits movement in the sagittal plane, and just to briefly revamp our terminology here, this is the horizontal plane, this is the frontal plane, and this is the sagittal plane, X, Y, Z, that sort of thing. So the sagittal plane is the one that operates forward and back. A barbell limits movement as it's pulled up the legs in the sagittal plane because the barbell is pulled up in contact with the shins and the thigh. And especially at lockout, a barbell is locked onto the front of your thigh by the fact that your body's mass is behind the bar, leaning back, locking the barbell into a stable position against contact with the thighs in front. It's a stable lockout. It's been stable all the way up. without any freedom to move in the sagittal plane because the bar contact with the legs limits that. A trap bar completely removes that limitation. A trap bar can swing anywhere it wants to in the sagittal plane. It can swing on the way up, and most importantly, it can swing at the top in lockout. Now let's stop at the top here, and now I want to show you the sagittal instability. See this swing? It's only 135, so it's not a big deal. If 405 was on the bar, that's not necessarily a wonderful thing to have happen.
So deadlift monster Gabriel Pena had not 400 but 500 kilograms on the bar, and he didn't look any worse for wear. In fact, having deadlifted 1,000 in competition on a barbell, I would bet that Gabe would attest to that being a more strenuous feat than anything he could do with similar effort with a trap bar. Now, Mark is of course correct. It has this degree of freedom that a barbell doesn't have. As he's going to say later in the video, that's a feature, not a bug. You want to be able to pull the bar back to your center of mass because that does something fundamentally different than a straight bar does, which is why it's a specialty bar. It's just like a cambered bar, like a safety bar. It allows you to stress a body in a different way, which can help with recovery. So you're not just hitting the same structures the same way. It can help you target weak areas. It can help you put the stress somewhere different. I'm going to get into exactly how the trap bar does that for the deadlift in a bit. But for now, to talk about like the stability of the deadlift being glued against your thighs at the top is an essential feature. Like, yes, your center mass being behind is what keeps stress on the posterior chain. It makes it a good developer for that. But we don't really notice that in any other lift. You're not going to talk about that with a squat. You're not going to talk about that with a press or most of the other barbell movements that you could do. Why is a deadlift special that you need this blockade preventing the bar from going anywhere and keeping it in your worst possible leverage position for every training stimulus you might do? Of course, it's abject nonsense. And that takes us to this ridiculous situation we're in where you're not being clear about the context. Is it a test or is it a developmental tool? The military is using it as a test. Mark's talking about it as a developmental tool. Okay, is it the only developmental tool you can use? Are there others? Are we doing this stupid shit where you just have one implement and you can only pick one variation with that implement in order to grow? And then you're going to spend all this time arguing about it. Even then, trying to figure out what's best while ignoring all the different goals that you could potentially have and how they might differ with what you choose to use. Now, the truth is we all have different goals. We also have different limitations. We also have different developmental curves, and we also have access to a fuck ton of equipment, and nobody is being forced to stick with one particular thing. So this is where the dogma around the supremacy of the barbell falls apart, because it can only be considered to possibly be true if you're talking about a situation where you have to pick one implement and you have to pick one exercise. And even then, there's more discussion to be had.
Now, this permits the thing that lots and lots of people like about the trap bar. It permits a more vertical back angle, because if you'll notice that when the barbell comes up off the floor over the middle of the foot, the forward position of the knees and the shins are limited by the position of the bar over the middle of the foot. This limits the position that the hips can also occupy, which also dictates the back angle. We want to pull with a more horizontal back angle because we want to train the back. We want the back to be stressed and loaded during a pull. A squat is the exercise we use that has degrees of freedom in the sagittal plane. And even then, we have to limit those so that we carefully load the hamstrings to the best of their ability to be contributors to the movement that we're trying to perform in the squat. But if we wanted to pull a barbell off the floor like a squat, we're already squatting. We're already squatting. We want the pull to be different. Note the wild amount of variation.
I agree with him that for developmental purposes, having a bent over position is way better. And people that, not with trap bars, you see people doing it with sumo. If you're really built for it, it's really comfortable, you're going to bias towards that as a young lifter, and you're going to do that more and more, not recognizing that being bent over in that really shitty, uncomfortable position is how you reinforce those weak areas and get kind of strong. 100%. But if you're programming the trap bar deadlift for development, there's nothing preventing you from taking a high hip position. You can do RDLs on them and they're great. You can do stiff legs on them and they're great. You can still tax the body that way. Now, I do think it's weird that he uses both the squat and the deadlift in a way that specifically targets the hamstrings and the posterior chain. If you have two lower body movements and they're the only two that you're going to do and they utilize two different movement patterns, I feel like it would make more sense to alternate, to play into the squat type pattern and then play into the deadlift hinge type pattern where you're very bent over, and that would give you the most well-rounded development. That's what I would think. But he likes a lot of hips on both. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter that much unless you're a bodybuilder. But I do think it's a weird thing to have a very unwavering strong opinion about.
Note the wild amount of variation that is available to the lifter with a trap bar deadlift. And this produces a highly irreproducible movement pattern. The thing can do anything it wants to do from rep to rep. There's no uniformity.
Beavers, let's go!
Now, this was obviously a very impressive lift. Call it an incline standing bench press. None of you can standing incline bench press 405. Very strong lift, but the fact that there is so much about what a deadlift has to be because you can't have these degrees of freedom. And then this is what pops up in seminars. In an overhead press, and you want to limit the degrees of freedom, but there's nothing anchoring your press. Not in a bench press, not in a standing press. You can physically ramp it back over your head, or you can lean back more and push it in a straight line. You can do anything you want to do. It is being a competent lifter and having a deliberate execution that requires you to put yourself in a specific position. And it shouldn't cause you to have a meltdown because you take away the bar, which is the source of your cue to drop the shins to touch the bar. And then you know you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Like if that cue gets taken away, as a competent lifter, you shouldn't lose all of your philosophical grounding that allows you to get some use out of a movement without fucking yourself up.
This is not necessarily a good thing because reproducibility of effort results in accuracy and precision. This is extremely limited by the trap bar. You can squat all the way down and pull this thing off the ground with an almost vertical back angle, like a front squat almost, certainly like a high bar squat. And people that like that don't seem to understand that a horizontal back angle is a feature of training effectively with barbells. It's not a bug. We want a more horizontal back angle because we want the back loaded, because we want to strengthen the damn thing. The back is not fragile. The back strengthens just like everything else. And when you pull a trap bar off the floor, pulling it off the floor with knees forward and hips low, if you want to do that, just squat that way. But we want the stability provided by the barbell riding up the shins, up the thighs, and locking out at the top in a stable position against the thighs. We want that stability because believe it or not, it is possible to fall down with a deadlift. If you don't believe that, then ask USAPL why they have some guy standing behind you at a meet nowadays spotting you on the deadlift.
The new project, I'm very excited to bring you BaseStrengthA.I. No matter what program you do, eventually progress is going to stall. That balance of stress and recovery is going to get a little wonky. And the only way you keep going is if you personalize it to yourself. This is all fine-tuned, exhaustive decision-making that we set based on the information you put in. So to start, there's a huge questionnaire, everything from your lifting style, your perceived weaknesses, your tolerance to work, your training history, all of these things get factored into trying to set a good starting point for you. That is put against a backdrop of my templates. So I started out thinking this is a cool gadget for people that are just highly serious and want the ultimate edge on their training, or for people that just like trying new shit, that try every new app when it comes out, or for people that just wanted to offload their decision making completely onto somebody else. All valid reasons to try this out. But as time went on, I started to see this more as something that inevitably had to be the replacement for remote coaching. This cuts that out at the knees because every time you plug in information, you're getting direct feedback. Like, nope, this is what you're doing now. This didn't go as planned. This is plan B. Oh, this went really well. You're sandbagging it. Kick it up a notch. So all of that is taken from the beginning through each workout, through each week, through each block for as long as you run the programs. And look, if you're not a guy that's sauced out of his mind or have all the elite genetics, this is the type of stuff that you want to tighten up. So if any of that sounds interesting, go to BaseStrength.com, try it out. There's a free trial. Again, so much gratitude. Really happy to be part of this cutting edge tech. So hit the link. Thanks again. Till next time. This is Bromley. I'll see you. If somebody falls back with the deadlift, it's because they blacked out or because at the moment where their hips and knees were putting out the greatest force, they lost their grip. The only time somebody's fallen back from a deadlift because the center of mass of the system is actually drifted behind their heels is if you tried to get somebody with cerebral palsy to do speed reps, if they were trying to max out while coming down off fentanyl, or if some basic female was trying to deadlift in high heels for Instagram.
There is enough instability in the barbell exercise, that is the deadlift, that we don't need to amplify the instability by using a piece of equipment that is inherently unrestricted in the sagittal plane. So that's the first problem. Now, the second problem with the trap bar deadlift is the grip situation. The grip in a trap bar deadlift is fixed by the equipment. The grip width on a deadlift is determined by you. You can tailor your grip to generate completely vertical arms. And vertical arms reduce the range of motion of the pull and therefore allow you to make up for that efficient range of motion reduction by lifting heavier weights. Heavier weights is why we're here. We're training for strength. Strength is more weight on the bar. Strength is force reduction. That's all it is. The more weight you pull, the stronger you are.
I really hate this because there's a thread of truth in it and it sounds good enough that people will take it as dogma, but it eliminates all of the meaningful context that's like super important for getting people to wrap their head around training the right way. So he's saying we need strength, which is force production. That means more weight on the bar. But if we want to add weight to get stronger, that makes sense, but he's using that to advocate for staying in your strongest possible position, which would represent a leverage advantage, which in some sense lowers the weight, which lowers the developmental stress. He just said we want the back bend over because that's how you stress the back to get strong. He's absolutely right, but he's drawing the line on like these millimeters of changes. Like if you go from here to here, it's going to negatively impact your strength gains because you're not going to benefit from the extra range. You're actually going to lose out by not being able to add whatever imagined percentage of weight you're not going to be able to put on the bar by having your hands out wider. Also, he's beginning to make the case that you can't lift as much weight in the trap bar, which is insane. I don't even mean off the high handles. Low handle, you should absolutely be able to deadlift more because the big problem with the deadlift is your fucking knees are in the way, so your leverages are shitty. Great developmental stress. Shitty for lifting as much weight as you can. Whenever you can get the weight closest to your center of mass as possible, more weight is going to be on the bar. When hyperfixating on one thing, you're neglecting this other thing that is very relevant to growth.
You can pull more weight with a barbell than you can with a trap bar.
Oh my God, that one hurt my head. It's not just that that isn't true, and we know that isn't true by experience and anecdote. There's no reason to believe that would be the case. That defies physics. You have the same muscles operating through essentially the same range of motion. The only difference is you have a massive leverage advantage by the weight being in line with your center of mass. You can't say that it's a shitty developmental exercise because it takes away the stress created by the poor leverages of forcing you to be bent over, but then also say you can lift less weight. That doesn't make any goddamn sense. Just follow the logic here. If you are stronger using a bunch of leg drive, you now have the opportunity to push your knees forward, bring your quads into the equation, get a strong drive. Some guys have a shit ton of leg strength relative to their posterior chain strength and can deadlift more that way. If you can't, because you can do anything you want with the bar, you can put it where you're strongest. And then once the bar gets forward movement, you can start to rock your hips forward and pull the bars back to lock out sooner, to get a leverage advantage sooner. You don't have to wait till you're above the knee to lock out. There's no scenario where you have the potential to lift less in a trap bar. If you experience that you lift less in a trap bar, it's because technically you're not comfortable with it yet. You always have the option to get in your strongest possible deadlift setup and maybe the option to get into a better setup.
You can pull more weight with a barbell than you can with a trap bar. And there'll be people argue with that. And the people that argue with that are the ones that have not really trained the barbell deadlift to its full potential.
Shit, you got me. I haven't trained the barbell deadlift to my full potential. No, coming from a strongman background, we do a lot of trap bar. Most of us do a lot of trap bar deadlifts, at least at some point, because side handle car deadlifts are a thing. Now, it's not quite the same because it's fixed. You can really lean back, but you get the idea. Being able to start in that position, learning how to rock your hips forward, not have the barbell in the way. That's a very specific movement that you want to do in training, getting ready for something like this. Now, aside from this specific application, one of the best tips I got for the trap bar came from Nick Camby. And Nick was a great middleweight competitor, and he grinded. He didn't just have a meteoric rise. Every year he did a little bit better, climbed a little bit higher. And his athleticism was always hindered by his deadlift. I think for a long time, his deadlift was sub 700, which is hard to get by with as a top 105 pro. And when I talked to him, when he had his run a couple of years ago where his deadlift got really good and it rounded out his game and he started winning a lot more, he said that one of the things he did was he was able to deadlift with more frequency because he started doing trap bar deads on the second day. This is the magic of using variations. You're not hitting the same structures the exact same way. So if you have trouble with overuse issues, if you increase frequency throughout the week with lift, 2, 3, 4 times a week with the same lift, you can't just go ham every workout. You have to have a plan that manages recovery. One of the easiest ways to do that, use something that doesn't hit the same structures the same way. Your nervous system doesn't get shot from trap bar because you are upright. That load off your spinal erectors, the difference in experience of the spinal loading, that is a huge game changer. That's something I've learned out of years of topping off my deadlift, is that the stronger I get, the more careful you have to be with how you manage your recovery. So that was a big one. My back didn't feel blown when I was doing trap bar deadlifts on other days.
Can be literally hitches that ball. Little dribble just from there for a double overhand. He gets so close on there.
So right there, that was at Europe's Strongest Man. Nick ended up placing 6 out of 12 guys, and he was the fastest to 4 implements out of 5 implements. He tore through it. That was right around 800 pounds, maybe a little shy. And to hit that is that fast after doing the 3 barbells before, his pull has gotten immensely better. And even though this is an elevated height, there's no scenario where Nick is moving 700 pounds like this at a similar height with a barbell. It just doesn't make sense that that would be the case.
Trap bar is fixed by the equipment. And the carrying angle, which is the angle out from the sides between the hands and the body here that you normally see in a supine hand position like this, the carrying angle is exaggerated on a trap bar. Also, instability along the axis of the load. Move your hands like we see this. This can be a factor if the grip is not actually taken correctly, because there is a 12-inch moment of inertia between the axis of that load and the front of this frame. It's inherently unstable. Set it down.
As soon as you pull it,
Yeah, because it's still weight hanging from your arms, and it still obeys the law. But there's no way to, the absence of a bar telling you where that weight is creates all that instability. With a barbell, it can be nice and tight and narrow. This allows your efficient stance to be nice and tight and narrow. And everything is improved by this position. This, coupled with the fact that the trap bar features sagittal instability, makes it a less useful piece of equipment, in my opinion. Now, if the Army wants to buy a whole bunch of these on a big giant contract with somebody, fine. Everybody's got to eat. But when you train, this piece of equipment is extremely optional.
All right, so sagittal plane instability, the handles rotate, unsafe, unstable, not as good of a developer, and on and on and on. He feels very strongly about this. What I find funny is that he's so focused on the instability when free weights are inherently unstable, which is one of the features of free weights that make them a bit more useful. If you really are just concerned about force production, and if you're just concerned about muscular development, that's the thing that you would optimize, is your ability to recruit more motor units. Everything you do would be stable. You would just be doing machines and Smith machines, things that are fixed, because you can tax the muscle more thoroughly and get more aggressive strength gains. If you're worried about specificity, that doesn't happen with the barbell. Barbell isn't specific to a goddamn thing you do in real life. So theoretically, if you just improved your ability to produce force and then practiced whatever activity you were going to do, you would be made in the shade. So it begs the question, aside from basic economy and convenience, what makes a barbell more special if that stability is so vital? The points of instability that he points out, are they present? Do you have to take an extra second to make sure your grip is centered? Yeah, probably. If you're a competent lifter, the idea that this would sideline you is fucking ridiculous. This was a reefer madness moment. This was the pastor from Footloose. Next they'll be dancing. And it was a bit silly.
Recently, you made a video trashing, literally, as we put it in the dumpster, the trap bar deadlift, calling out the U.S. Army for utilizing it in their new fitness test, the ACFT. Your arguments are flawed. Not because you're wrong about the trap bar, but because you misunderstand the purpose of the ACFT. Most people in the Army would agree that the barbell deadlift is superior. The ACFT isn't a meet, though. It's an assessment used by leaders to measure their subordinates' fitness, which helps gauge unit readiness. Trap bar deadlift can be taught to soldiers at any level of experience with a lower chance of injury. This is a stupid statement. This is a stupid statement, all right? I think I demonstrated that the inherent instability in the trap bar creates a greater safety hazard than does the deadlift. And as far as teaching soldiers at any level of experience the deadlift, and to assert that the deadlift has a higher chance of injury than the trap bar deadlift, indicates that you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. All right, we teach groups of people to deadlift every month at the seminar. We've been doing this for 15 years. We've never had an injury in the groups of people we teach, some of them having never deadlifted before.
Yeah, that's great. You never had an injury when you were teaching people at a seminar how to lift. I would imagine you're probably not loading them up with as much weight as they can physically move. You're probably a little more concerned with how it actually looks. For a test, that's performance. People are going to be pushing themselves, exerting effort. I don't know if it's a 1 rep max. I don't know what the test actually is. But to suggest that it is more inherently dangerous to have people who have never deadlifted before, who don't have any understanding mechanics, to get into an upright position than it is to do a deadlift because Rip thinks he can teach them all in 3 or 5 steps how to deadlift without ever running into an issue, that is also asinine. The important factor isn't whatever arbitrary series of steps you have people take to get into what you think the best starting position should look like. It is their ability to maintain that as they exert effort. And that is wildly different for everybody. And it takes a long time to get around if you are in fact deficient. I, for instance, have shitty leverages for pulling, short arms, relatively long torso, and as such for a lot of years, every time I would try a 1 rep max or even get above 85%, my back would round horrendously. And it was despite every effort to keep it the same. And it took a lot of years to fix that, a lot of deliberate effort to fix that. And a lot of people find that their legs and hips, the horsepower in it, overpowers their ability to maintain rigidness through their spine. To suggest that everybody's going to be in just fine a position and ready to go balls to the wall absolute limit with little or no experience is silly. And we know this because we have high school weight rooms to look at. It's not just CrossFit gyms. It's not just powerlifting meets with people who've only been lifting a couple of months. And we can see what the strongest kids, these are kids that lift religiously, that are concerned with technique, that are trying to perform, that have direct coaching. So right there, I didn't search shitty deadlift setup. I just searched high school football deadlift, and this is what popped up. This is the very first thing. Strong kid. Kid looks like he weighs about $180, deadlifting 516. That was a good effort. No strength, no rigidness in his midsection whatsoever. He just found the position that requires the least effort, hung on his erectors, and that's a habit that he drilled over and over. Now, can you adapt to that? Sure. Can your back get strong as a guaranteed injury? No. But to suggest that you're going to get something better than this from a bunch of military recruits that you're trying to have go balls out on a test for a job is absolutely silly. It's also silly to suggest that this is less of an injury risk than the potential swing. Like, is somebody going to come up and start kicking the trap bar to get it to swing on you like a pendulum as you're locking it out? That whatever perceived instability is somehow more of a net negative. And we can keep scrolling down. Same thing, got the weight up, but no finesse, no deliberate setup, just allowing the body to contort into whatever position gets the weight up. That is the feature of a barbell that years of training is required to overcome for most people. That's also why starting strength works well, because it's slow and incremental. There's progression there, but it's at such a steady, even pace that it allows you to ingrain really good technique, or at least consistent technique, before you really start pushing the weight. I think that's very valuable for newer lifters. But again, you're talking about essentially Gen Pop.
5 steps. It takes 3 minutes to show somebody how to do a correct deadlift. 3 minutes. And if you can't learn to teach the simplest barbell exercise in the book, then you have no business teaching anybody anything anyway. The deadlift is the easiest of the 5 major barbell exercises to learn. And I'm sorry, you don't know what you're talking about.
He's so angry. That's just a bizarre statement. It's not about your ability to mimic what you think a good deadlift should look like with the 25-pound bumpers on. It's about what happens when you apply effort. And if you take a bunch of people who are not technical, who haven't practiced the cues, and that'll be a lot of the people you're testing, because not everybody in the military is doing starting strength or doing barbell work 4 or 5 days a week. If you have them try to perform with effort, they're going to have form degradation. Form degradation looks like hips coming up first, bar drifting forward. These are things you have to practice as you get better to reproduce. You're talking about high reproducibility. Doing that with effort is not easily reproducible with new lifters. You're going to see backs rounding, like an angry cat. You're going to see the point of the body that has the most force on it, the torque in the low back, that being exposed and vulnerable, and you're going to see tweaks and issues. Is it going to wipe them all out? No, probably not. Maybe if they started training for it, yes, that you might get a better result. But the fact is you don't need to deadlift 500 pounds in order to be effective or resilient in the military. That is not a requirement. So complete, there's low stakes, and what you're saying is hyperbolic, and it was wrong in a bunch of points. Like objectively, to suggest that you can't pull more weight when your leverages are the absolute best. What? So short list of the things a trap bar can be used for. I already talked about using it as a way to get more deadlift volume in, taxing the musculature, somewhat similar movement pattern, while applying some recovery that makes it more sustainable. I like it for specific contest prep. Obviously, if I have anything side handle, which is a strongman, you will have that in. It's great to target leg drive at the start of a deadlift. If you're a conventional deadlifter, doing trap bar deads, especially lower handles, teaches you to drive hard into the ground. There is some benefit to that from going a bit higher and getting overload, but think of the value of a deficit deadlift to your regular deadlift. It's similar. The low handles, you're going to feel yourself squat in more, and it's going to condition that knees forward drive through the ground. So competitive powerlifters, that can be a big advantage as an accessory movement. It can target quick hip extension. I really like this. The fact that the bar isn't in the way means that before the bar gets to your knees, you can start rolling your hips in. Now, even though that's not how it's going to go off with a straight bar, it can absolutely teach a really aggressive and fast drive forward with the hips. You bring it on board faster, and you kind of synchronize more tightly how the glutes push the hips forward in order to facilitate a strong lockout. So just by virtue of drilling a fast lockout with a trap bar, you might be surprised that when a regular barbell gets above the knees, how conditioned you are to try to snap your hips forward into it. Number 4, it's great for targeting the glutes and hams in an RDL. I went over in my video, like a cambered bar, the center of mass drifts back. That means less stress on your torso. Less developmental stress? Absolutely, but that's not always the most important thing that we're trying to do. You can feel that your glutes and hamstrings get more of a stretch. You can more aggressively push them back, and you can tax them more thoroughly because your rectors, midsection, upper back are no longer the weak link because they're slightly deloaded. You can use it for extreme overload. That has value. A lot of people go ham on that. Don't do high trap bar deadlifts every day of the week and neglect everything else, because that's going to be just jerking yourself off. But for extreme overload, to really handle heavy weights, get yourself exposed to that, there's absolutely a benefit to that in key situations. I like it for general support with shrugs and carries. You can do that. I like open trap bars for carries. Don't ever do it with a closed trap bar. That's a good way to lose your Achilles. But just the time spent in that neutral grip. It's why farmer walks are so good. Traps, upper back, again, you want to talk about getting a strong midsection? Yes, being bent over with a weight is good. Also being upright with a lot of weight is very good, especially if it's in your hands. And then number 7, my favorite. Number 7, I already went over, using it as another variation that allows you to increase pulling volume. These are all powerful tools for serious lifters. And to write all of these off because you're fixed in this fantasy world where you can only pick one exercise with one implement, and if you use anything else, then I don't know what sin you're committing. It doesn't make any damn sense. If you're trying to sell that to advanced athletes, it doesn't make any sense. If you're trying to sell it to newbies, it assumes that they need the amount of frivolous size and strength that you assign to advanced athletes as a goal, which also isn't true. So it falls apart from both ends. And I've promoted before, I like the rep trap bar because it's affordable and it does more things than anything else does. It's rated up to like 1,300 pounds. You can use it as a cambered bar. That's the reason I got it. I wasn't going to get a trap bar just because. When I saw you could use it as a camber bar good mornings, one of my favorite deadlift accessories for that reason. Center of mass coming back, deloading your spine, allowing you to get more hip extension work in. And it also has a built-in deadlift jack, which I think is really fucking cool. So I like all of those aspects. The link's below if you want to check that out. But that's my take on the trap bar. It's a great movement if you implement it right. Nobody has ever substantially improved their ability to pick up weight with a trap bar and not seen a radical transformation in their body. It just hasn't happened. So that's all I got for today, guys. Let me know what you think. Comments below. Till next time, this is Bromley. I'll see you.